Welcome to another episode of Ex Tempore, where I bring together the players with the audience to discuss what happened in the previous session of ADlib&D, what were their characters thinking at the time, and any other thoughts our valued listeners might have about the game. If you have any questions concerning last episode, do not hesitate to use Twitch chat to pose them, and I will get to as many as I can over the course of the session. Now, this episode is going to be slightly different. We didn't actually manage to get a game on last Friday due to some technical issues. And as such, we were looking for a more broad concepts, D&D concepts for tonight. So if you have any of those, don't hesitate to throw them up in the chat, and we'll see what we can do about discussing those. But without further ado, I might throw my first thoughts over to you, Dagobah. Do you have a broad concept that you want to discuss at the moment?
Yeah, sure. You hear me okay, right?
I can, yes.
So I was thinking, about what was your favorite campaign that you either ran as a GM or as a player, and why was it your favorite?
Oh man, that one I would say is probably this one. I would say, which is kind of silly, but yeah, this has been my favorite campaign, and it's because of the level of interest with between players, and the story itself is I'm finding it quite enjoyable how you guys are resolving things and then finding out on things. In general, I'm finding this campaign quite fun.
Well, that screws me for my follow-up, because my follow-up was, who's the main BBEG?
Well,
you can't give that up. That's why I was thinking maybe you had, well, maybe then as a player.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite as a player that you were involved in?
I am having difficulty with that. No, not off the top of my head, unfortunately. But I guess I could throw it to you if you've got something in your head.
Well, my favorite still is I was running a Southlands campaign that's Kobold Press, through the Kobold Press Midgard setting. The Midgard setting has kind of an extension. They haven't fully developed it a lot. I mean, they do have a setting for the Southlands, which is kind of like basically Africa, but magic instead of technology. And what I liked about it was I had a good group of players, and very much as well similar to this in that they were very much invested in their characters. And they were, I guess, when things kind of fell sideways was just when things were getting really interesting, where they started seeing the patterns that were starting to connect them to the main plot line. And in that case, they never actually figured out, because we just ran out of time and in real life and stuff like that, and I had to cut it. But the BBEG was basically, in the Southlands world, there are an insect race, similar to, I guess, I think you call them the Three-Keen or whatever in 5e.
Yeah.
So similar to them. And there was a queen.
The insect race for 5e was it's based on Dark Sun. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. So very similar in the Southlands campaign. They had a race, an insectoid race, and I originally, when I was coming up with it, I thought this was a good way in which to unify the players, in the sense that they were all refugees from small towns about the setting or whatnot, or even a couple of them came across as having popped through a portal from a different plane, i.e. Faerun, and arrived in this world. And ultimately, all of them got together because they were refugees and they were living in the refugee camp. And as refugees, they had to figure out, okay, well, enough time, 6 months had passed, what the hell are we going to do? And so that's how they started working together to become adventurers. And then they started putting together, through their backstories and whatnot, learning about where and why they had been, in some ways, I'm not going to say they were all pivotal characters in order to see an end, but each one of them, through their own experiences, was somehow related to the events that were going on that were outside of their control. And then they started to seeing that. And as they started revealing more of their backstory, or even discovering more related to their backstories, they started seeing that, oh my God, there's all kinds of patterns here that are tying things together. So I was having a lot of fun doing that, and how to do it subtly and not, go overboard. So that was a lot of fun, really.
Well, that's good. And they enjoyed seeing those patterns when they did emerge.
Well, yeah, those I think as a GM, those are the moments I live for. The big reveal moments. Yeah. Those are the ones that are, you just feel like you've really accomplished something, and the more you can do that, or the more you can. And there was I think it's the what's that infamous GM, the angry GM, who was talking about every time you have something that you want the players to figure out, there's always 3 clues. And for each of those 3 clues, there's 3 ways to figure out what each of those clues are. And then eventually, perhaps those things tie together. And so, I mean, it's hard to take that to heart. It's hard to think of what are the 3 clues that they might discover. I do a lot of that ad lib myself and ad hoc. I just try to remember, well, what's my theme here, and who's this NPC that they're interacting with, and overall, are they connected in one fashion or another? So it started working out really, really well, and I was really starting enjoying that, and I really got like at least 2 or 3 really big aha moments, and well, like I said, that's what tickles the fancy.
That's awesome. And on to addendum that, sometimes if the players are missing those clues, even though you've tried your best to steer them in the right direction, and they're going down a different path, saying, "Oh, it's the butler," for example, to take a turn of phrase, and then you go, "All right, well, if they're going down there, let's expand that and actually change what the story says it is, and turn it into, yes, that is the butler," sort of thing, and in that way, you actually can make something that the players have been focused on much more important than what it is originally. Certainly, in this campaign, I've done that to a certain extent as well.
Yeah, like it's a trick, I guess, not to force things down their throat, because it can be easy to start doing that and let them, give them their agency, and yet. I guess this is the bit of, there's always encounters. There's always will be encounters, and you don't have to have them serially line up. Must do this encounter to hit this encounter to hit this encounter. They're just a whole bunch of encounters, and they either go here or go there, and then from there, what can you push or throw in that hopefully they see. And sometimes if they don't see it, you're just like, well, not this time, I guess. Maybe the next
throw
one
something else out. Yeah,
or they roll really bad. Like, I'm a pivotal scene where I had a player who's, God, okay, he's got all he needed to do was roll a 7 on perception. Is all I wanted him to notice, that he saw someone sitting at this outdoor cafe that he recognized, and he was basically talking to another NPC as they were walking down the street, and they were involved in this conversation. So I didn't want to lower that DC. Because of the way that conversation was going, and then he rolled bad, and I gave him advantage at it too, and he rolled bad, and I was like, okay, well, he's not going to see that NPC over there, so he's not going to get that extra clue, and you let it go.
And then you could probably look at that and expand it later, whether that NPC that they missed does something, and then you see the clue later on, but it's
and to me the world expanded on. Yeah, the world is organic, and it keeps on growing. So maybe they don't see them at that moment when they could have got a clue there. And then perhaps with that NPC, clearly something else was going on with them, and days pass, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now they don't, it's not just picking up because now they're back and now they're paying attention. It's, well, what else has happened in that other NPC's life that have affected what they're doing? And I think that was one of my favorite aha moments, was when the players they had an option. One player was developing a relationship with a self-proclaimed princess. She wasn't a princess. She was just different. And so he's developing a relationship with her, and their associate, their police associate, was just like, I haven't talked to her in a while. Where the heck is she? So they had an option. They were to go out and do this investigation for the there was basically a group of vampires that ran a district within the city, and they tasked them, well, can you guys go do this for us, and we'll be in your debt. And so they're like, well, do we do this for the greater whole or for this one person? And they chose that they were going to go and do the deal for the vampires. And so they went and hired a PI to go and see if the PI could go and find their friend. And to me, there was a consequence to that. And so weeks later, because they thought that they could go out and do this vampire thing like in a day, turn it around. Well, no, it took 2 days to get to where they needed to go because they had to leave the city and whatnot, and 2 days to get back. So nearly a week had passed by the time they got back, and their friend, they eventually found out, was kidnapped. And so then they had to go and find their friend. And, it was great to see them go through that those emotions of, oh, geez, did I really make the wrong decision here? We didn't learn what we hoped to learn for the vampires, and now our friend is kidnapped, and it was great.
Yeah, that's good. And there's no, in D&D, the good thing about that is there is no wrong decisions. You just they're decisions, and the grayer you make things, the much more, in some ways, much more interesting outcomes you can get from the players, because they can't choose which way to go. They just choose the way that they feel is the best way, and not to be an evil DM, but you can tweak that to get use some reactions that you want.
Yeah. Well, or when you bring in new players and the old players don't bring the new players up to speed and just take for granted that the new players know everything, and they don't. And so I had another scene where there was this person in bed, and the new players thought, we're going to catch this one unawares. And so they snuck up to them, smashed them with their warhammer, knocking them out of the bunk bed that they were resting in. And then when they fall on the floor, I reveal, because I'm using Discord and I use a private channel, and I let one of the guys know, because he rolled good up, his passive perception was good, and I was just like, oh, by the way, that's your friend that's been missing, you haven't seen for a while. And he's just like freaks out. And then he's revealing to the other character, stop, what you doing? And it was just fantastic. It was, worked so well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah. And by the way, guys, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them up in the chat, and we'll look at them. And I guess expanding on player agency, that is something that can catch up new DMs, and I certainly would say it catches me up as well. Balancing the level of player agency with the level of prep work you have. There's
with no doubt.
There's different ways. There's no right way to DM. But there is lots of different ways. Some DMs go in there with absolutely no prep and run a reactionary style campaign with whatever the players are doing, and having sandboxes and those sorts of things really help out with that. But others, others are sort of focused. Yeah, others are sort of focused on, we need to have this, and then you're lining up encounters 3 months from now, which obviously that's an extreme, but that sort of thing. There's no right way or wrong way to do it, as long as you have your agreement from the players that they're happy for these sorts of things. Like there's discussions of railroads, and as long as the railroad's fun, I don't have an issue.
Some players might just enjoy it because they're very much just want to get to that end. I find that the more role playing it is, the more sandboxy people want to compare to railroading.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for me, it was always I had prep, and 5 minutes into the session, my prep was pretty much thrown out the window because of player agency. So to me, my solution really was basically sitting down and be like, okay, there is this NPC involved in this session. Well, what is that NPC's motivations? And that went well. It was the ones where there was no specific goal, so more or less these shopping episodes. And there's numerous of those ones, and those ones, man, did I ever feel lost and trying to make something out of those episodes. And strangely enough, the players enjoyed those, and I'm just like, oh man, that was stressful as hell.
Yeah, if you're always jumping from one thing to another, not knowing exactly which way the players are going to jump.
Yeah.
But I can see that. And
for sure.
I mean, that certainly player agency can get to a point where sometimes you definitely need to move the plot forward for good or for bad.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
you
you don't get
something.
anywhere. So you need to pick up on some techniques to encourage the players to pick up on those things and move the story forward, whether that's using NPCs or
and
backgrounds.
There's definitely a trick to it. I tend to use in character things quite often in order to progress things, or something that the player, like I had players at one point in time, they're like, we want to go and check and look for these wolves, and I was just like, good Lord, they kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and they wanted to do that. And so I had to figure out, well, how am I going to prevent this? And eventually I was just like, I said, I had the tribe more or less, look, we don't need you guys to be involved in this. This is ours, and it's not honorable if you go and do it. This is our honor that we need to resolve. So, oh man, trying to come up with something on the spot to try to keep them from going in that one direction. And I mean, yes, it's definitely railroading, but to make it seem like their agency, that can get stressful.
Yeah. I mean, a good recent one in the current campaign is the mammoths, where I was not expecting you guys to engage with that. That was probably a bit silly of me, thinking, oh yes, you're throwing that out there. Of course they're going to engage with it. They're mammoths, for God's sake.
I'm just painting the scene. Wait, what?
I'm trying to make it as natural as possible. Oh, look, of course they're going to go to that.
So that makes me. So what then would be, say, like a favorite mishap that as a GM that you did that was like, oh geez, that one spun way out of control. What am I going to do?
Okay. So, well, the most recent one certainly is the mammoths episode, but another one is when I was running one shots back in the day, which weren't streamed, and with one shots, and I was getting people that didn't know how they played. There was this one situation where I had set out, okay, this is kind of the way the story is going to progress as far as I'm aware, and the players just decided, no, we're not interested in that, and so they went off in a completely different direction. And I was trying to give them player agency to see this is what they see, but also, not trying to shut it down straight away, but also trying to provide some sort of links to the way I was hoping the story would progress. So it was a difficult juggle that you sort of let them run where they want to go, and hopefully after an hour or so, which is a one shot, you don't have a lot of time. After an hour or so of going with the trail running cold, they kind of pick up on that and move on.
Or you hope that they pick up on it. And let Otherwise, you railroad them a little bit. Yeah.
Well, this is what I was hoping, but you guys went this way, so sure, that's what happens. You might not find out who captured the prince, but that's by the by. You had fun.
Yeah. I mean, that's to me the main thing is, do they have fun? Yeah. I think mine was, and I think I spoke to you on Discord about this because I was like, this was when I was just more or less starting out. I had one player, and it still stands out in a big way because I was like, oh my God, what a disaster. They were playing a female. So male player playing a female character. And I don't remember why or what was the context behind their big, I'm going to be pregnant. And oh God, that was just like, you want to be pregnant? What? And I struggled with this and trying to find some sensical way or something to do with this. And
I remember this.
Yeah.
I remember the dark and devious ways we went down that path.
Oh yeah, it was. Well, in the end, decided on they thought they were pregnant, and I mean they were role playing that they were pregnant, but they really weren't pregnant. What I did was I had them as being the host of a slad tadpole or whatever you
That's what I remember. Yeah. They were incubating a slad tadpole.
That's right.
That's completely different to what happened.
And so I I still, like I said, I can't remember what it was that led to this. And then I was just like, I don't know what to do this. And I was reaching out to GMs that I knew to like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? But it stands out as one where it's just like, oof, that one spun way out of control. And well, that player too was an interesting player to keep on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. What are your thoughts on someone playing a character sex that is not the same as their own, like a male playing a female or vice versa?
I don't mind. It really depends on the player. I would rather know the players before they went and took that. Like if you're in a West Marches, like that we both know of, not much you can do there. But if you know the players, I would rather they didn't do that unless you knew them well enough that they aren't going to abuse it, because it could get into things that you do not want to go, like the whole sexism stuff, or talking about topics in such a way because I don't know, they're vindictive. Who knows what? Got to be careful on that one, I think.
Yeah, it is certainly something you want to run with a level of caution. I agree, but like for me, for example, whenever I seem to create characters, I kind of alternate. I'll choose one that's a male and a female, and usually I do that because since I DM quite a lot, I want to try and keep my ability to role play both.
Me too.
And different people, such that if I play characters to that style as well, it'll hopefully keep me a bit fresher at role playing a female character as a DM.
Yeah, that's the exact same reason.
Yeah. So and it can be quite an interesting take on things too.
Yeah, well, even going beyond that is just there are so many different ways in which to live nowadays, and potentially taking on any one of those roles and trying. But yeah, as a GM, you have to be just as much careful, or even perhaps even more so than say a player might. I mean, I like agency, but again, I still have boundaries. Maybe that's just me being an old fart.
Well, I mean, if it's tastefully done, I don't have a problem.
Yeah,
and it's
tasteful being the trick.
Yeah, tasteful. And I mean, you could say that about someone playing the same sex as the person. So, like, as long as those things that you've described in your session 0 aren't focused on. So, like, if you indicate, look, if you're having those sorts of situations where your character is interested in another character, as long as we fade to black to that sort of thing, which is the general take on those sorts of character interactions, then that's fine.
And as you said, the session 0 to me is quite important, because you really do want to at least have some kind of address to maybe not focused directly on that, but at least, hey, look, be aware. I mean, the don't be a dick thing is kind of really universal, but yeah, session 0 I think is really important. I wouldn't want to do a campaign without it.
Yeah, and for the listeners there, if you don't know what a session 0 is, session 0 is a getting together with the group before you actually start the campaign, and it can be it's to discuss how you want the style of the campaign, whether you're after sandbox or more of a story-driven campaign, but also it goes through and discusses how we deal with certain character interactions and the exploration of character building in general. So the DM may discuss house rules during that session 0, but also how you want like what is expected with levels of role play and that sort of thing. And it's a really good thing to do before you start a campaign, because nothing is worse than about 3 or 4 episodes into a campaign and you realize, wait, this campaign isn't for me. And you may still get that even if you do a session 0, but it's less likely. So that really helps out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think it's really, really important too. Like, especially for me, when we're doing a lot of online play, where we don't know the players, I tend to advertise. Like, I've used the Fantasy Grounds forums to do advertising, where I'll say this is how I want to weight it in terms of role play versus combat versus, sandbox or railroader, etc. and then reinforce that with whatever the setting and the rules that we're intending to use in the actual, okay, now we're talking with potential players who are looking to sign up and be those players.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very important. Very, very important.
So just a reminder, we didn't have a game last Friday, unfortunately due to technical issues. And so we would normally be discussing what happened on Friday, but due to that situation, we are more discussing general D&D concepts. So if you have any D&D related questions, don't hesitate to throw a comment in chat and we'll discuss them where we are. I think we've probably got another 5-10 minutes of this before we might look at wrapping up. And the aim for next Friday is we should have a game. It's depending on the technical difficulties we had last Friday. It'll either be a one shot or it'll be the continuation of the campaign. So there should be a game on, but as to whether it's the campaign or not, I cannot say at this point in time. Anyway, back to our discussions. Did you have anything else on your mind at the moment, Dagobah, that you want to discuss?
Well, I was going to tell you that, so I am a player with another GM. So I do the 2 things per week. Yours in the ADlib&D that we stream, and in another one. And in the other one, it was an interesting thing because we went into those areas of, how do you go and how well do you know the other players that you can go into a certain area. And we were talking to an NPC, and the NPC was like, all right, you killed my guards. What are you going to do for this? Like, what are you going to compensate me with? And, as as a player, I was just like, well, our goodwill, you'll have the goodwill of our group. And they're like, that's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. So we were, humming and hawing as a group of what we should do. And one of the players is this young, 19-year-old, I think he's humanoid. I think he's human. And he's kind of a little bit of a womanizer. And so, at one point, he'd met another NPC earlier on where that NPC was like, look, if we get married, you will have status within the lords and ladies of this town. And then that might aid you. And we could use each other beneficially in order to find more power. And he wanted none of that. So when we're talking with this other NPC, I was just like, yeah, I don't know, maybe you want to have a tussle with our friend here. And it went dead quiet. And then everybody just kind of like, oh, that was so funny. And they role played with it, and it was just great. I thought it was just a lot of fun. So yeah, you do really need to get a feel for your players before you go into some areas that might be touchy.
Yeah. And that's where having some sort of level of communication between sessions really helps out too.
Yeah.
And I certainly recommend that.
Oh yeah, and I'm a big proponent for, look, if you are going to do something with your character, discuss it with your game master first. Make sure that they're going to be okay to swing with it, and then don't just drop it on all the other players' heads in the next very session. Try to set it up so that the other players are seeing that there's a pattern evolving. Especially if you want an aha moment where they're like, "Oh Lord, you were setting that up. Now I get it." So and again, talk with your game master. Make sure that you work and plan at something so that they're not also caught off guard and then having to deal with fallout. So it's important. Conversation is important, really.
Yeah, and the opposite is true. If you're a DM and you want to see something progress from someone's backstory, it can be quite beneficial as long as you're not trying to surprise them, saying, "Look, this is how I see your backstory interacting here. Are you happy with me going down this way?"
True.
And you might be surprised with some of the players going either yes or doing a yes and, so adding to your thoughts and actually making it richer for having that conversation, which can really help out the story. I'm all for story.
They could be too that they're like, no, that's not how it is. That can't be that way. And so it's important to have that conversation, because then you're like, you don't go in a direction that they're like, no, that's not me. That's not my backstory. And then all of a sudden they're no longer liking their character. Yeah,
that's true. You definitely don't want to have someone losing interest in their character because of something that you may have accidentally done.
Yeah.
hoping that it would be interesting.
Yeah. But I think as we all grow, eventually we get to the point where we're like, any kind of challenge in the role-playing arena is take it on as a challenge. Like putting that emotion in that maybe you more normally wouldn't. Maybe then it becomes something that you want to give it a whirl and see how it works if the other players are cool with it.
Yeah, definitely. And you will find that in general, if you've got that back and forth between DM or GM and players at a very smooth level, the game will benefit from it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then you start getting a lot more of those aha reveal moments, and man, like I said, live and breathe by those ones.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I think we've probably got about 2 or 3 minutes to go. So if there's any other questions or any questions from the audience, please don't hesitate to throw one out. Otherwise, I might discuss. This is probably a little bit unusual, but possibly what you guys will be facing during the campaign in possibly the next episode. So you are getting
don't tell me.
No, I'm kind of putting it out there to not going to expand it too much, but sort of leave you hanging almost. So you are getting closer and closer to that monolith.
For the cave, we're at the we just exited the cave. We flew up and got out of the ravine, and we're now in the biting cold of the long death. The long cold death, yeah. Yeah. And I reckon where we left it off. What'll happen is you'll come across that there'll be a level of familiarity that you'll notice in the next episode, something that you haven't seen in a while, but will once you get close to it, you'll go, something we haven't seen. I'll have to think about that one. Yeah, I don't want to say too much, but and you probably it's not as probably as it like the aha moment as you've been mentioning, but it's like you'll come across something and it might be difficult to resolve in the normal way. Bugger, you're a pain when it comes down to your damn puzzles. I let Riki and Jace, Namtar and Frankie figure that out, because I'm just like, can't I just roll a knowledge check? I'm lost. Oh, I'm happy to have those knowledge checks rolled as well to provide hints. Yeah, but yeah, it's actually quite a tricky art sometimes to create a puzzle that is not too difficult but not too easy. Yeah. Just trying to find that right balance can be quite hard. Yeah, I think I remember the very first time I was doing a puzzle, and I was just like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And then and the players were just not picking up on any of the clues. And then at one point, one player was like, can I do a knowledge check on when I'm looking at this in order to see if I might know a little bit more? And I was just like, skill challenge idea. Yeah, okay, right, of course, why not? Skill check something, and you notice that this and this and this, and they're like, that was the stuff that they weren't able to figure out, but it was enough of a clue then that they were able to then see what they'd been missing clearly. And that's where I was just like, oh yeah, using your skills, because you're playing intelligent, but you might not actually really be intelligent. So how do you play intelligence? And you've got all of those skills. Use skill checks. Yeah, it's also hard to separate the knowledge of the player or the reasoning power of the player compared to the character. Yes, for sure. So, like if you're playing a dumb barbarian, for example, but you are quite you enjoy the puzzles. You're sitting there going, "Oh, I know the answer. Yeah, but I can't say anything. Yeah, I know the answer, but I can't say anything." And that's why I guess the beauty of die rolls and stuff like that. And even when you're playing someone who's not intelligent, this is my advice nowadays: is let your dice do the talking for you in moments like that, where you're like, I want to see if I might have an answer, and clearly you do. And you want to volunteer it to help out the other players, but do you do it? And or I mean, if you can think of a really interesting way to do it that doesn't really put out that you're actually quite smart, or you just let the dice do the talking for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's in some ways that's why I don't try and tank intelligence too much, because I think I'd have great difficulty playing a character that doesn't is it not at least above or like average intelligence.
Yeah, wisdom and intelligence. Playing those, someone has to be a really good actor in order to get that across. Otherwise, I mean, the dice can help. And I mean, that's a big part of what the game is using them and being creative on skills. And that's why I like, the kits and, forgery kit. If you've got proficiency in a forgery kit, well, what can you do? Well, let's see if I can forge those documents to get us past that patrol. Why not?
That's right. Yeah. And those, I rarely see forgery kits and disguise kits used in the games I play, which is a shame because, or get to use them myself. Because they add a nice level of additional dimension to things.
And this is one of the beauties of Fantasy Ground, I think, because in Fantasy Ground, you just add those kits to the skill tab, and if they are proficient in it because of their character or their background or whatever, their class or background, even if they're not, you would add it. But if they are skilled in it, you just put the proficiency star beside it, and then it's there in their skill list. So they can, it's easily seeable, so they don't have to look at their inventory. They're looking at their skills and they're like, you know what? What if I use my brew skills here? And okay, I've got an hour. I'm going to try to brew up this, and maybe I can use this to convince this other person later on. So something just off bonkers, and hey, maybe it works.
And maybe it does. And also just going along the lines of. As a DM, when they run that, definitely give them a chance. So that they don't have to auto succeed.
Yeah.
But definitely, if they want to go down that path, trying to jump on and ride a mammoth, give them the option.
Yeah.
It may not work, but
may or may not work. Exactly.
It can be surprised exactly what happens.
It player agency, and it breeds to more creativity and imagination, which I think are all just great things for the story.
Definitely.
Yep. And it just means, as a GM, it just means that we have to be a little bit more willing to listen and not be so stringent and be like, well, no. And I think often, too, they'll say, players, we tend to say something like, we're trying to catch the GM off guard. And I've started getting in a habit, and I guess thanks to things like Critical Role or Matt Colville and some of the things they do, where I watch that and I'm just like, you know what? You're right. Maybe I do need to go and say, look, I have this idea. I want to do this. And that's what I did with the mammoth when I was saying, I want to try this. And I didn't want to be, okay, I'm going to try to catch the GM off guard and make this work. So I wanted you to be aware, this is my intention, and I want to have some rolls to see if I can make this happen. And then if you know what we're doing, then you could be better suited to see, okay, well, can he succeed trying to do what he's trying to do?
And I reckon you would have succeeded eventually. You were on there and you started to rope it up. The problem was that it was starting to run away.
Yep. And to be expected, because realistically, for me, just as being someone who's originally from a farm, training any kind of wild animal, had to have some really crazy good rolls for that to happen.
Yeah.
But I didn't expect it, but it was fun.
I haven't mentioned this to Namto yet, but I think one of the things that was missing was animal friendship. Like, you can speak to the animals, but you're not charming them at all.
That's right.
You're just talking to them.
That's right.
So they're going to be initially suspicious because, animal instinct is such that it's fight or flight. Yeah.
And well, you do something that I've never actually thought to do. Normally, when I'm having players communicate with animals, I tend to not talk to them. I tend to tell them what the animal is seeing, and they have to interpret it.
Okay. Yeah. Whereas
that's just how I do it.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea as well. I think I've probably done it for ease of use, really.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, everybody's got their own style, and sometimes it's just easier if you can say than trying to paint a scene. But that's why, like, there's some other guys out there who there's one of the players I know, Hagrid. He's creating up a bunch of Fantasy Ground ready divination like tarot deck type cards that, you know, if someone's trying to do any kind of divination thing, as a GM, you can just pull one of them up, and it could be showing a fae with something else, and you're like, this is what you see, and just leave it up to them to interpret it as they like. And it's just
that's nice.
Oh, it's beautiful, right? Or maybe you know, if there's a lot of divination going, then it becomes really handy where you can be, look, you know what, I really like this one, and I'll present this one to that. This is what you see. And there's something very clear and subtle that you want to bring up, and maybe it becomes a recurring theme. I don't know. There's just so many tools, you know, to create and foster that imagination and try to make those aha moments. So it's fun.
Yeah.
I love it.
Definitely. I think at this point we might wrap up for the night. So join us next Friday. So a couple of days' time at 8:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is GMT plus 10, for either the continuation of the campaign, where the party is traveling across a frozen wasteland towards a dark monolith, to who knows what they'll find inside, or otherwise it'll be a wacky one-shot where I have yet to come up with the ingredients for this one-shot, but maybe I'll look into the votes that have already been posted and try and run it that way. But either or, I think we'll have fun on Friday.
Yep. I think we'll find out that a little bit more about the squirrel Bindi.
Maybe not in a one-shot. All right. Well, see everyone on Friday. Bye.
Bye-bye.